Hey noble ones, welcome to Metatron's Academy. I noticed that the other day you enjoyed my react to the channel RobWords, and it was the video where he was talking about the names of all English cities. Well, I noticed he has a video called The Origins of Every US State's Name. Now, of course, we're not going to review the entire video because that's not what I do in my react videos. We'll react to a few sections and then you'll find a link in the description below and as a pinned comment to go and finish the video in the original channel if you like what you see. Let's go.
One video, 50 state names to explain. Let's just get cracking, shall we? And I'm going to ease myself in a bit here by beginning with New York. Although it's not actually directly named after the city in England where I used to live, it's named after James Stuart, the Duke of York, who eventually went on to become King James II. What's the origin of York, though? Well, the Romans...
Well, I believe there is still a connection there. I mean, I understand it's not named directly after the city. Not trying to be pedantic already, but I'm just saying it still has to do with York. Because when he said that, I was like, really? I thought it did have to do with actual York. Is he going to tell me now it's a completely different town in a completely different area? No, it still is York.
Romans called the place Eboracum, inspired by an existing Celtic name for the area, meaning place of the yew tree. When the Anglo-Saxons came along, they put their own little spin on Eboracum and called it Jorvorvik, which translates as village of the boar. And then the Vikings named the place Jorvik, from which we get York.
I've got to say the Viking has got the coolest name.
If you want to know what the Vikings might have called New York, check out the Icelandic name for the place.
Cool.
Homesickness is behind the name of New Hampshire, which is of course named for the English county of Hampshire. So the Anglo-Saxons, Hampshire was Hamtunskir, which appears to mean village, town, county. See that skier at the end? That becomes our word shire, and also gives us the start of the word sheriff.
It's interesting. I thought that shire is how you pronounce it in isolation. But, well, I suppose that's what he's doing here. I'm just remembering that then when you put it, however, usually English people, when you put it together with something else, like Yorkshire, I've never heard anyone say Yorkshire, at least in England. But I could be wrong. He's a native.
Shire Reeve was a district official. New Jersey is named after the Channel Island of Jersey, and as I explained in a recent video, that's probably named after a Viking. It's thought to perhaps mean Gears Island. Oh, and here's
That's pretty cool. That's where all the aliens are right now, right?
Did you know that New Mexico was called New Mexico before Mexico was called Mexico? It is true. The Spanish came up with the name Nuevo Mexico in the 1500s, and they were naming it after a region around present-day Mexico City. Mexico,
right,
in turn, comes from this word for the area. New York,
Just to add to that, also the word comes from the term Mexica, which is one of the ways the Aztecs refer to themselves. They didn't call themselves Aztecs, as far as we know. They refer to themselves as Mexica.
New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico. What isn't new is the practice among colonists of naming the lands they come across after places they already know.
Yeah, I'm sure this is connected to probably like nostalgia, if you think about it. One is, well, it makes it easier because you don't have to come up with an entirely new name, which sometimes I'm going to say luckily, because some names sometimes is really bad, so at least. And then the other thing is, I think it's a way for people that are away from home to feel a little bit like, hey, let's go to freaking New York, meaning York, or let's go to New Hampshire, that sort of stuff. And I've seen a few cities that have names of Sicilian cities where I'm from here in the US, like Syracuse from Sicilian Siracusa, and Palermo from Sicilian Palermo, of course.
Even when the places they've arrived in already have long established names that were given to them by the locals.
Yeah, that's what the Romans did too. They renamed places a lot. Sometimes they sound a bit like it's a Latinized version of an original local vernacular, but other times they just completely ditch it. I'm like, nah, what's that nonsense? And then they come up with a Latin term.
A large proportion of this video is of course going to centre around Native American names. The names of more than half the states are at the very least inspired by words from indigenous languages.
That's interesting because I of course knew that some of the names are inspired by Native American languages. I was aware of that. But more than half, I had no idea. This is fascinating.
But let me just tick off some more of the ones that aren't, because another practice popular among the Europeans was the rather sycophantic naming of places after their bosses back home. Georgia, for example, is named after Britain's King George II, who granted the charter for its formation in
After royalty.
1732.
Makes
And
sense.
the Carolinas are named after King Charles I. Carolina comes from the Latin form of Charles, Carolus. In fact, Carolina was very briefly called Carolana. Carolina was split into two in 1710.
Carolina does sound better than Carolina.
61 years after Charles himself had had something very similar happen to him.
Oh no.
Maryland is named after Charles's wife, Queen Henrietta Maria, who was a real badass, actually. She managed to avoid the same fate as her husband at the end of the English Civil War by fleeing back to her native France, but only after raising an army on Charles's behalf. She died in France in 1669 during the reign of her nephew, King Louis XIV, the Sun King, Le Roi Soleil, and after whom Louisiana is named.
A lot of kings in America, hey?
The French actually called it La Louisiane, but that got anglicised into Louisiana. And there's one more European monarch who got a state named after them, Queen Elizabeth.
Oh, which one is it? Elizabeth? Did Elizabeth become Utah? Colorado? Which one would it be?
Seen as one of England's greatest ever monarchs, she saw off the Spanish Armada and oversaw a golden era for the arts. And yet, it's the fact that she was a virgin that was immortalised in the name of the...
I would have never guessed. It would have been easier for me to believe that her second name was indeed Dakota. Elizabeth Dakota.
state of Virginia. I'm sure she was thrilled. And I bet she's even more thrilled to know that there are now 2 states named after her.
Well, actually, I think she would have liked that. You have to put it into period perspective.
You know,
She
friends
was proud of it.
Elizabeth I claimed she could speak as many as 9 languages.
9 languages! Amateur.
There's probably an exaggeration, but at the very least, we know that she was a master of French, Italian, and Latin because we have documents and translations that she wrote. But nowadays, she could have just used type AI.
I'm more interested now in the Native American populations a lot, so maybe let's watch a few. I'm kind of curious I want to know. Dakota.
Delaware.
Who's Dakota?
And this seems like the perfect point to begin our exploration of the states who take their names from words from Native American languages. But what you're going to notice as we do this is that in a lot of cases, we don't know for certain what those words mean.
Oh, I was going to say, watch it mean like something cool, like... They were like messing with us Europeans. It's like, oh yeah, that's you name your state after this word. It's a beautiful word and it actually means something. Who knows?
In some cases, we don't even know which language they're taken from. The colonists did an absolutely woeful job of keeping track of such things, a lack of regard for native languages that clearly continues to irk indigenous peoples. A personal disclaimer then, I am a British guy speaking to you from Germany. I don't speak any of the native languages that are about to crop up. Well,
yeah, of course. I mean, how many people do? I think it would be fascinating to learn a Native American language. I've got like a checklist. For instance, I think I want to finish fluency in Mandarin, then I'll like to reach fluency in modern Greek, then I want to tackle a Nordic language. But after that, it could be cool.
Avoid causing the sort of irritation that the Lenape described, I'm going to keep the dodgy European attempts to pronounce native words to a minimum.
Ah, but you didn't do it with Latin, did you? Well, I'm an ancient Roman. Prove me wrong. You should make that disclaimer so you don't upset the ancient Romans. Because remember, British man, this is what you visiting Rome looks like. This is what Rome visiting you looks like. Jokes aside, I don't think you needed to do that disclaimer, but hey, it's your channel, you do what you want.
Let's start off in Alabama, if only for alphabetical reasons.
Yes.
Alabama comes from the name of a Muskogean tribe who were living in the region, although by the 1780s they'd actually migrated to modern-day East Texas, where they still are today. Over the centuries, the Europeans used the term Alabama, or variations of it, to...
Alabama, Alabama, Alibamo, Alibamo, Alibamon. I kind of like the last one. Alibamon, Alibamon, Alibamon. Yeah, I like the last one. Which one do you like?
To the people and the river from which the territory takes its name. There's a well-worn theory that Alabama comes from a Choctaw phrase, meaning something along the lines of thicket gatherers. But that's now thought to be unlikely. As is the idea, it means here we rest. Basically, we don't know where it comes from. Arkansas gets its name from the Quapaw people. Their tribal name, Agakpa, means downstream people because according to
Downstream people, it's kind of cool.
tribal tradition, their ancestors went down the Mississippi River when other tribes went upstream. Anyway, the Europeans refer to them as Arkansas or Arkansas, and the state's name is just the plural form of that.
That is fascinating.
But it's the French plural. And the French tend to lose interest before they reach the last letter of a word. So
Right.
the final S isn't pronounced.
That's why you say Arkansas and not Arkansas. What about Kansas, though?
Kansas is named after one of the tribes who, according to that same tradition, made it upstream, following the Mississippi and the Missouri. They're the Kansa or Kaw people who say that their name comes from a Siouan word meaning south wind, an apparent reference to their use of the power of the wind in war ceremonies.
That is actually beautiful. The wind, the people of the wind. I love that.
The state of Missouri is named after the Missouri Indians, although Missouri isn't actually what the tribe were calling themselves. Their name in their own language is Neatachi. Missouri comes from the Illinois Miami
Oh, yeah, I was going to say.
language word for them, meaning something along the lines of the people with the dugout canoes. The French turned that into Missouri, whence Missouri. Oklahoma comes from the Choctaw words for people and red, so
Red people?
you can take it to mean red people.
I don't know why you seem so... Mate, it's... listen, okay, 1 second. But I'll let you finish first. I don't want to speak before, just on a face. There we go.
It sort of is what you think as well, because the region gets the name just as a lot of indigenous peoples are being relocated there. Although the guy who came up with it was Choctaw himself. Illinois...
Okay, so not a problem. I doubt, honestly,
gets its name...
This guy. Wait, where is he?
Although the guy...
Right, since let's talk about the elephant in the room for a moment, because I'm a guy who just speaks it for how it is, you know me. I highly doubt that this guy was racist, okay, towards other Native Americans. Hence, if he's the one who came up with it, there is nothing wrong. You don't need to do that, why adding that, RobWords, at this point? This is not an attack, but I've just got to say it, because it looks a little bit like virtual signaling at this point, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe he's just a lovely guy who likes to make sure that no one gets offended, and that's his channel, it's his platform, and it's, of course, it's freedom to do that. But I'm just saying, red people sounds cool to me. I don't see anything wrong with it, and as long as the natives don't see anything wrong with it, and I don't think they do, since it's a native who came up with the idea, then there is no need to make the face, just because it kind of pushes this idea, European bad, that it's always annoying to me. No, there are some people are bad, some people are good everywhere. Let's do that.
Who came up with it was Choctaw himself.
Yes.
Illinois gets its name from the French word for the Illiniwek group of tribes. The word Illiniwek, in turn, comes from their word for themselves, which translates to something like ordinary speakers.
So really, what you were saying earlier on, how like the European over there did a horrible job, doesn't look like, they messed up a few times in the sense that, okay, so they talked with this tribe, and this tribe used in their own language the name for the other tribe, and they're like, oh, that's what they called them, okay, we'll call them that. But yeah, perhaps they should have asked the actual tribe that they were talking about. I get that part. Absolutely agree with you. But in the majority of cases, it seems like they didn't like come up with new names. They simply tried to adapt and use the terms in these autochthonous languages to refer to these people, but then adapt them in a way that was easy to pronounce. I mean, at the end of the day, we all do this. It doesn't matter where you're from. We all adapt. I don't think that you, when you speak, when you pronounce the names of cities in China, in Japan, do you use the tones? Do you use the correct pitches in Japanese? When you speak my own language, you say Milan, you don't say Milano. You say Venice, you don't say Venezia. You say Florence, you don't say Firenze. So you are adapting, okay? We all do this. And at the same time, you probably say Beijing, you don't say Beijing, you don't use the tones. Do you actually say Tokyo? No, you don't. You say Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagasaki. Like, I doubt you do all of that. I do when I speak the language. I try at least. But when I'm speaking my own language, a European language in this case, but if an Asian person did it, if an African person did it, and they adapt to the names of my cities and they use them in their own language, there is nothing wrong with that. Everybody does it. So it's just one of those things. They didn't do anything wrong. In fact, if this was a situation where like, oh, the Europeans actually didn't even care what these people called themselves and started to use swear words to name them, then I get it. I'd be like, you know what, let's change that. Let's remove it. It's not right. Absolutely, I'd be 100% with you. But this looks to be a little exaggerated for no reason, really.
They could understand one another. Iowa's story is similar to Illinois' in that it's a French attempt at a Native American word for a local tribe.
Case in point.
Bakojay were known by their neighbours as the Sleepy Ones, and it's the French version of that that's used for the state, and indeed the Bakojay tribe in English today. The Dakotas are both named after the Dakota people, who consisted of 4 groups. These groups called themselves the Dakota, the Allies.
That's very cool. That's what Dakota, well, actually, I love this. You know, even if I disagree with his way of presenting the information for obvious reasons, I still appreciate what I'm learning. Since we are talking about these things, because he's saying Dakota, I wonder if they actually say Dakota, Dakota, Dakota. Who knows? If you are from this tribe and you know, let me know in the comments.
One of the theories behind the name Texas is that it also comes from a word meaning ally, this time among the Caddo people, who also use it as a friendly greeting. To the Spanish, it became Tejas, and in English, that became Texas.
A bit like Mexico, Mexico, when you use it in between Spanish and English, yes.
There's also another theory that Texas comes from the Spanish word for yew tree, because the region's bald cypress trees reminded the Spanish of yews. But the Caddo theory is the more accepted one. And it's pretty much the perfect opposite of the story of Idaho, a word which nowadays is thought to come from this Kiowa Apache word meaning enemy, a word that they used to refer to the Comanche people. Funny story, Idaho was very nearly the name of Colorado, because 19th century colonists were under the false impression it was a native word meaning gem of the mountains. They realized it wasn't just in time and stuck with Colorado. However, in the meantime, a steamboat had been given the name. A mining complex was then named after the steamboat, and then a territory was named after the mines, by which point the mix-up back in Colorado had been forgotten. So now we have a state called...
So, enemy potatoes. Sounds good. I'm halfway through. As always, I don't like to review the whole thing because I want people to be encouraged to go and check out the original video. So still, thanks to him for the research, of course. And there is still a lot of states that you can check out. Alaska, from European languages, Oregon, Rhode Island, and all of that kind of stuff. So thank you very much for watching, Noble Ones. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. And as always, thank you for joining Metatron's Academy. Bye.